Welcome back to the Passing Through podcast. This week, I have an episode for you that is very, very dear to my heart. Because one of the visions I had for this podcast back when I first started interviewing guests was not just to speak with interesting people, but also to give voice to those who are underrepresented or those who have been historically oppressed. In addition to speaking with people who I admire, who I think are doing work that leaves the world in a better place, I wanted to raise awareness and help tell stories that aren't often told. Because for us to really see one another, we have to tell our stories and put our voices into the collective circle. This is what's required in order to be heard, to be felt, to be understood. In order for us to have a more holistic, representative perspective, which includes the pains, joys, fears, triumphs, the sorrows and tears, the agonies and the ecstasies of a diverse population of people, which after all is the world we live in today, we need to hear the stories of those having a human experience that isn't known to us and may be different than our own. So it was a great honor for me to speak to this week's guest, A'ida Shibli. A'ida has worked tirelessly for decades to raise awareness of injustice and break cycles of political violence. She's a feminist, a nonviolent activist, a Palestinian Bedouin, an educator, an inspiration, and as someone living in one of the world's most pioneering intentional communities, she's proof that we can live differently, that we can organize ourselves in configurations which better serve life and champion our own humanity, love, and interconnectedness, not just with one another, but with nature and the universe around us. In this conversation, we talk about a lot of things, ranging from the current genocide in Palestine to colonialism, the enormous responsibility writers and journalists have in shaping discourse and framing narratives, the consequences of white modernity, consumer capitalism, and the resulting alienation, emptiness, and dissatisfaction these things breed. We speak about the importance of community, sitting with uncomfortable feelings, and how love is likely the only thing that can get us through the current challenges we face as a species. This conversation was one of the most personally nourishing and life-affirming conversations that I've had. A'ida is a hero, glowing with love and courage, and she's putting her values into practice. If you want to know more about her, her Women in White project, her work at Tamara, or in Palestine, or you'd like to donate to her upcoming initiatives, there's one coming up in Rojava in Syria, so please, if you have some spare cash lying around, maybe even in the order of 9,000 euros, please donate. I don't show ads on this podcast or ask listeners for anything, but just this once, if you've got it, give it. You can donate to her initiatives on tamara.org under the donate section, mention the Palestinian Fund, and those proceeds will go to supporting her work. All of her info and the link to Tamara will be in the show notes, but I wanted to take a quick second to read a bit of what I understand to be the declaration of intent for the Women in White project. Imagine 100,000 women dressed in white coming into a war zone. Imagine them forming a nonviolent human shield. They are spanning all nationalities, all religions, all shades of skin, hair, and eye color, and all ages. Imagine them standing together to protect everyone, regardless of side, political affiliation, or national identity. They are committed and deeply trained, and they are determined to use the power of nonviolence to call everyone back to their humanity. I think that's an incredibly beautiful intention and something that I hope is successful. But now we're at the point of the episode where you, the listener, have two choices. If you want to skip straight to the interview, fast forward to 21 minutes. On the other hand, if you want to hear me expand a bit on one crucially important aspect of our discussion, keep listening. Either way, be good to one another and hug a tree for me. So, earlier this week, I saw a clip of Ta-Nehisi Coates promoting his new book titled The Message, where he's confronted on CBS by a hostile American interviewer on the topic of Israel and Palestine. The thing that was ironic about this was that it was immediately after Coates makes a incredible point about the responsibility writers and reporters have for informing discourse. I'll have a link to the clip in the show notes because it's an absolute masterclass in poise and composure and conversational prowess in the face of an adversarial line of questioning, but his point was spot on. Writers and journalists are storytellers, and our stories are our mythology. They're the source for our morality and our beliefs, which, over time, harden and become our convictions. If we tell ourselves inaccurate stories, we warp and distort our picture of the planet and the people in it. And right now, as I record this episode, the world is teetering on the brink of a regional war at best and a world war at worst. Now, more than ever, careful attention must be paid to how narratives are shaped, how populations can be propagandized, how power structures manufacture consent, to borrow a phrase from Noam Chomsky. In my conversation with A'ida, we speak about media and the dehumanization which results from the distorted coverage we receive as Westerners. This episode is going to release within a few days of October 7th, marking a year of Israel's latest onslaught on the Palestinians. In that time period, it's estimated that 200,000 Palestinians have been killed. The level of destruction that's happened over this past year is staggering. 70% of homes, 88% of schools, 80% of commercial facilities, over 600 mosques, 155 hospitals and clinics, 68% of cropland. According to Oxfam, Israeli forces have killed more children in Gaza in the last year than all of the civilians killed in the Ukraine war. And that's in a population 19 times smaller than Ukraine's. Not to mention the nearly 200 journalists who have been killed, over 1,000 healthcare workers, hundreds of aid workers, and the tens of thousands that have been wounded, often having sustained life-changing injuries. While A'ida and I were speaking, unbeknownst to me, Israel began its unlawful invasion of Lebanon, bombing residential areas, killing countless civilians, and this was only a week after orchestrating an unprecedented terror attack where it installed explosives in consumer electronics and detonated them throughout Lebanon, killing dozens and wounding hundreds. I've captured a handful of headlines from the past few days which I feel illustrate the point about bias. These are headlines from reputable, mainstream news organizations like the BBC and the New York Times or the Washington Post. These are considered credible sources. They're often considered even liberal sources. But pay close attention to the language here. This first one is from the New York Times, 24 hours apart. And the first headline, Israel sends troops into southern Lebanon. Notice the neutral phrasing of sending troops instead of using a verb like attacking or invading. And compare this with the second headline. Iran attack on Israel escalates regional conflict. Notice how the more provocative aggressive verb of attack is chosen here, and how a supporting clause is added, framing Iran as the aggressor for escalating a regional conflict. Now, if we look at a headline from the BBC, Israel currently conducting ground operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And here's another from the Washington Post. Israel begins ground offensive against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The Washington Post also uses words like ground maneuver or ground operation or phrases like move into to avoid using the word invasion. Who knew that there were so many euphemisms for the word invasion? And now if we contrast those with articles that look to The New York Times covering Israel's actions, for example. Let's start with this one. Explosions Gazans say was airstrike leaves many casualties in dense neighborhood. This next one is actually real. It's only 4 words. Lives ended in Gaza. How about this one? Strike on area where displaced Gazans were camped kills up to 25. Or Gazans weep and pray over loved ones killed in attack on former school. All of those headlines happen in the passive voice. They make it seem as though things are happening in Gaza, but they don't mention who is making them happen. Lives ended in Gaza. Whose lives? Who's ending them? Why? How many? What are the details? Why is this phrased in such a way that's vague and neutral? Or the first one, explosions Gazans say was airstrike leaves many casualties in dense neighborhood. What were the explosions? Was it an airstrike? Why are we using the term Gazans say? Can't this be confirmed or denied? Who carried out the airstrike? Who deployed the munitions? Israel's name isn't mentioned. And the final one, Gazans weep and pray over loved ones killed in attack on former school. Who attacked the school? Was it bombed by Israel? How many people died? I would imagine at the school there were children there. Well, why isn't that mentioned in the headline? And this last one is from the BBC. Loud blasts heard in Beirut after Israel's military told residents to evacuate 3 areas immediately. Imagine if liberal media organizations wrote headlines the same way when Israel is attacked. Instead of Iran attacks Israel, they'd read something like, loud blasts heard over Tel Aviv, locals say, as Iran begins strategic targeted operation. In writing and in speech, we have the option of using 2 voices, active or passive. John made the pie is active voice, and the pie was made by John is the passive voice. A classic political use of the passive voice is to say something like, mistakes were made, instead of saying, I made a mistake, or this administration made a mistake. Politicians from Richard Nixon during the Watergate scandal, to Ronald Reagan after the Iran-Contra affair, to Bill Clinton during the DNC funding scandal, and even George W. Bush in response to the torture and human rights violation scandal at Abu Ghraib. They have all used this device to minimize accountability and shirk responsibility. The use of active voice versus passive voice in the headlines I just read should raise your eyebrows. Nearly 2,000 people are dead and 10,000 are injured since Israel invaded Lebanon. It's worth noting that Western media generally portrayed Israel's pager terror attack as a praiseworthy military operation, describing it as precision targeting, for example. When Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israeli military bases, killing no one, the media covered it as an all-out escalation and an act of war. Some people may hear this and go, yeah, sure, okay, but these are just cherry-picked headlines. And yeah, you're right. You can Google them, and you can see if they're all real. These are just a handful of them to help reveal a pattern. I encourage you to go do some Googling yourself and see if the pattern holds. Listen to the discourse in the US and the UK and see how false or distorted assertions play out and what consequences they have. It's not a coincidence that the countries arming Israel are the same countries defending Israel's right to use said weapons. Watch where the money flows. It flows out of the hands of taxpayers into the hands of private defense contractors. Look at the stock charts for arms dealers like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman. They're hitting all-time highs. This is publicly available data. You can see it. Propaganda is manipulation. It's using the media to unduly influence a population and give shape to a shared story. Pay close attention to which groups are vilified and which are extolled. Note which groups are freedom fighters and which are terrorists. Observe the instances where armed resistance is lauded and the instances where it is condemned. Chomsky said it brilliantly decades ago when he astutely stated, "The great powers, meaning the West, use the term terrorism simply to refer to the forms of violence of which they disapprove." And now some other listeners may say, well, okay, sure, I see what you're getting at, and yeah, all of this is morally repugnant, but at the end of the day, this is happening in a foreign country across the world. How does it affect me? I can't do anything about it. And to this, I have two things to say. First, take to the fucking streets. Get out there like people did during Vietnam, or during the Civil Rights Movement, or any movement, women's suffrage. People's liberation anywhere across the world happens by people working together and raising their voices and standing up against tyranny. So raise your voice. Resist tyranny, because it does affect you. Many listeners of this podcast live in the United States, and right now, in the southeastern United States, it was just hit by Hurricane Helene. It's left 600 miles of destruction in its wake. People are dead. Homes are gone. Water and soil are contaminated with toxins and chemicals. People are starving. It's a national emergency. The organization responsible for intervening in these situations to deliver aid and mitigate harm is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA announced a $9 billion funding shortfall for Hurricane Helene relief. The same day, the U.S. gave $8.7 billion in aid to Israel. Now, maybe you don't live in the southeastern United States, and you say, okay, I wasn't getting any benefit from that $8.7 billion anyway. That's not for me. That's for emergencies. But hold on. Let's talk about how budgets work for a fiscal year. There's a finite amount of money allocated each year for a given governmental function. If money is moved from one place, it has impacts on other places. Think of it like this. Let's say you have a checking account for paying bills and keeping quick access to cash, and you also have a savings account to slowly accumulate resources for a rainy day or an emergency or a down payment on a luxury mega yacht. You know, these kinds of things. But if you deplete your savings account, then you have no money left to move. So that $8.7 billion could have been directed toward medical research, education, ecological preservation, building and maintaining public infrastructure, or funding social services. But in order to do that, that money needs to be available. So whether you realize it or not, giving billions to other countries for death and destruction does impact you. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that $8.7 billion was stolen or taken away from disaster relief to fund a genocide. I'm saying that the money that could have been available for this emergency wasn't, because it was sent to fund not just a genocide, but a violation of international law as Israel invades Lebanon. And I don't know about you, but as a US taxpayer, I would rather my money go into the things I mentioned. I would rather we spend on medical research, education, ecological preservation, public infrastructure, and social services. I don't think we need to spend more money on war and shift money out of taxpayers' hands into private equity for arms dealers. Lockheed Martin shouldn't be hitting all-time highs. If capitalism is a system that creates luxurious, lucrative wealth for arms dealers, for defense contractors, and the military-industrial complex, we should resist that. It shouldn't be the case that we operate inside of a system that profits from death, war, and genocide. This, to me, should be something that's unacceptable to every human being, because it's dehumanizing. And it allows for this cycle to continue because there's money to be made. It robs us of our humanity, of brotherhood, of seeing ourselves as people to be treated fairly, people deserving love and care and safety. So yeah, all of this, the point of this long ramble is just to give you something to chew on, something to think about. Pay attention to those headlines. Notice the passive and active voice. and think about things that thinkers like Noam Chomsky was trying to raise awareness around, about the dangers of these structures, the insidious nature of them, how the media can control discourse, because this is the same thing that modern thinkers like Ta-Nehisi Coates are trying to remind us of and wake us up to. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to stop rambling and just get to the episode. Hello, A'ida Shibli. Welcome to the Passing Through podcast.
Hello. Thank you for inviting.
Sorry for the technical difficulties and the rescheduling, but I'm super happy to have you here, and I'm glad that everything worked out and I was able to talk to you for a little while today.
Thank you. Yeah. May these be the only technical difficulties that we are facing. This would be sweet. We can take a breath and say, okay, in the end, it can work.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is just to give you the floor and talk a little bit about yourself and about maybe how you're doing today, how you came to be where you are today, just a brief backstory for people who may not be so familiar with who you are.
Okay. Where to start? It's a Friday today, and every Friday is kind of an emotional day for me. It's a day that when I was in Palestine would be, oh God, the time that our people are going to the mosque to pray, and other family members would be at home preparing the meal for Friday, and then welcoming the people back from the mosques. And there's celebration. Friday is a time that we check on our relatives. We invite the poor, the ones who are lonely, to the Friday meals. We greet each other. Sisters come and brothers, and it's a very busy day in Palestine where I grew up. And now for the last years I got to got used that Fridays is a kind of a lonely day. So I create also a sense of home around me here. We're living in Portugal, but it's the day that I miss Palestine the most, and especially in these times that of genocide. And I go through all the connections and the people that lost, and I see that my nervous system cannot include 41,000 people. So I often collapse. And so this is Fridays for me. This is where I am at this moment. Challenging times. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's hard for me, and I don't even have family and friends and people there just watching this and hearing about it, and day after day after day, month after month, years. It's so much, and I wonder for you, how do you balance that? How do you hold those feelings?
Yeah. I can say that this last year have been one of the most extreme times that I knew, or my people knew. And so if I don't look into this year and say in general, because nothing started on October 7th, things started many decades ago. But for the last many years of my life, I would balance this with prayers, with growing hope, with studying about global structures that makes it possible that this episode of the conflict in that location be erupted, and collecting people and teaching and studying and working in the land and growing food. All of these ancestral ways balance the effect on ourselves as individuals. But I have to admit and confess that this last year with the extreme dimension of it, caught me and many people like me that we are out of tools. Like none of us is prepared for such a dimension of genocide and of destruction. And still, as an activist, I still organize and hold and do and hold speeches, and I teach and courses. But we are not programmed for genocide. We are not programmed for that. We are not made to go through that at all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's something that I've been asking myself and talking to people about is how do we, in the face of genocide, how do we summon peaceful protest, nonviolence, feelings of forgiveness and acceptance in the face of something that is so unhuman, it feels, is so misaligned with all of my values and what it means to be a human being. When I see you and the work that you do, like for instance, the Women in White project that was happening in Berlin, maybe you'd like to speak a little bit about that, but to me, it's amazing, and it gives me hope to see people and know that you're doing things like this. But how does it feel for you? Because I would imagine you also have feelings of anger and rage, and it must be so much to contain, and maybe sometimes you wonder if nonviolence is the way. Like all of these things, I wonder what they feel like when they pass through you.
Yeah. What is it to summon all these actions? I think for me, it's like this place of knowing that I will raise my voice and put my body and my soul in service for life. And this might take my life, my own life as well. And this will bring me immediately to the whole confusion that I'm seeing nowadays with nonviolence and avoiding conflicts. I think that's what I said also before, that we are in moments of historical tests for all the things that we theoretically acquired, and we speak about them, and now it is like this. So how do we make discernment between violence, force, revenge, and then we would need to go and search what is the intention behind it. And violence per se, it is a place that it is the intention is to hurt, the intention is to take revenge. Force is life power that is also needed to discernment between something that is right and something that is wrong. I meet it a lot, especially with Western people, especially with Christian background. This huge confusion between judgment and condemnation. We don't want to judge. That's why we want to stay on the side, on the wall, not taking sides, because there's a huge confusion between judging and condemning. And we are all the time making judgments, all the time. To cross the street, to make coffee, all the time we are making judgment. You judge the situation. That's how you walk. Condemnation is the place where you cancel the being. And I am calling also, especially through activities and peace actions like Women in White, to make this discernment between loving the being and clearly making a clear judgment for the action, and saying you are loved as an individual, as a group, as a nation, but your actions are not for life. And by this we raise love as a political force. Like Bill Hooks speaks about that we made love wrong when we reduced it to the romantic love. But love is the ability to challenge the situation to a political force. And so I would say, if people who are mostly or also believing in nonviolence stay on the side while seeing the genocide is happening and refusing to take a stand for life because they don't know, shall they stand with Palestinians or shall they stand with Israelis? And I'm saying, no, never make an automatic stand for standing with Palestinians or standing with Israelis, but make your stand always standing with life. And so sometimes this side will stand for life, his actions will stand for life, and sometimes the other. So I don't want you to just stand automatically with me, but I want you to be accountable, to hold me accountable for my actions. And so when there is a nation like the Palestinian nation that is under colonization for the last 100 years, military occupation for the last 75 years, genocide like Gaza for the last 17 years, closed in a ghetto, people have the right to resist. Who am I to tell them how to resist? I'm living in Portugal. I am Palestinian, but because of my life circumstances, I was forced to move to Portugal. I'm in the diaspora. Do I have the right to tell the people in Gaza which way to resist? Do you have the right? No, you don't have the right. And for sure, when the uprising of 7th of October happened and all the lies that were spread by Israelis about rape and beheaded babies, and so I was so shocked. And I remember I said to myself, if this is true, if my people rape women, I will not stand behind them. Because I am a feminist. I am standing for the wholeness for everybody's life. And then everything was a lie. And because of that lie, while the West is still believing in it, even some Israeli sisters still believing that this happened. Ugh, it hurts so much. It hurts so much. But then I know that people have the duty to resist colonialism. Even Jewish people who resisted the Nazi in the concentration camps, they were glorified. Until today, they are glorified in Israel. What's the difference? What's the difference? My heart is shattered under the double standards of the West. I live in Europe, and I'm every day grieving this double standards, this level of lies. You meet me in very despair times. That growing hope is every day a sacred duty.
Yeah, I thank you for your vulnerability and honesty, and I find it difficult myself to hold what you're sharing. So sorry if I seem also a little bit rattled by what you're saying, but it's very heavy emotional stuff, and I see it too in the media, in the Western media, in the United States, in the UK. Things are often framed in a way that is very questionable, in my opinion. And I think this helps a propaganda, this helps a narrative of belief and this discourse where people see things as, Israel is just defending itself, and things are, even headlines, they'll sometimes say like, missile explodes and kills 10 or something like this. And that's not really an accurate framing of an event like that. That's pretty neutral. And I think when people talk about things in a neutral way, like you're saying, when they're not taking an authentic stand and condemning something that is in violation of life, it becomes hard to even talk to people who might agree with you. But if everyone's getting this news input, it starts to distort perspective, and it makes it hard to talk about things in a way that's actually real.
Exactly. I think never in history we could see the gap between the governments of the West, and including USA, and the people. Not all the people, but the majority of people went out to the streets demonstrating and calling for ceasefire and calling for accountability. And the governments are still arming Israel. And these are the places that people need to look into their governments and hold them accountable. But also we need to raise questions. So why governments, not all governments, but we can also see which governments exactly are arming Israel and why? And these are the moments that I say we are tested. All of us, we are tested. So being in a state of questioning is a very sacred state, is a place that you have to come to terms with the things that we believe in, the things that we were fed with narratives that are not standing for life, but then to ask, what is the interest of these governments, especially these governments, to arm Israel in such a way? Why? And then we would come to colonialism, we would come to capital. Per se, the most moving foundation of this war is capitalism and white modernity. And when these two go together, it's a fatal situation. I was the other day watching a trailer for a movie that was done by Polish filmmaker Angelika Holland, Green Border. And it's a documentary fiction that speaks to the difference, the huge difference of how Poland welcomed Ukrainian refugees. And I was in Poland. I was teaching just now a lab school in a community in Poland, and my companion was walking me through Warsaw, and in every moment showing me what did the Polish people did for the Ukrainians. She was so proud, and me too. Beautiful to welcome refugees, and at the same time, Poland put all the refugees who come from the Fertile Crescent, which is their alternative term to the Middle East, which is a colonial term, put them in a green border between Poland and Belarus, where there they are under huge injustice, camps, and all kind of torture in Poland. And so one has to ask the question, why is this double standard? Why? And then we have to speak about racism. We have to speak about systematic racism. We have to speak about that racism is internalized inside of us, even if active colonialism finished in the most of the world, except in Palestine, coloniality of power is still working in the psyche and the identities of most of the white people. And so these are places, moments of testing. And when I say testing, it's like if I am as a white person, really being in a questioning state and observing these observations, I would like the person to distinguish between him and the system. So I wish for people not to go, as now you said your reaction, but it was not because of white. You were overwhelmed by the information that I was bringing, and that's okay. As Greta Thunberg said, I want you to panic. We need to panic. We need to understand, not to panic, but to be awakened. And so if a white person would hear a person of color and a person from the global south speaking about systematic racism and colonialism and white supremacy, I would wish that that white person distinguish between him as an individual and the systems that is working through him. And that's a gap that allows us to speak soul to soul and connect. It's the same with patriarchy. If I'm as a feminist, as a female body, speaking to a male body about patriarchy, and the male body will shrink and take it individually as an accusation, that I don't have a gap where I can interact. And these are the places where we need to educate ourselves. But the systems of oppression often try to mix our psyche as individuals with the system itself. So we become the system. We operationalize the system itself. And these are the dangerous places. Indifference, ignorance, numbness, consumerism. We are the best soldiers for these systems.
Yeah, beautifully articulated, and that's such a great way to visualize that, because you're absolutely right. There is this blending or this fusion of identity into these structures to make them more resilient and more tenacious and more powerful. And often the opposite happens when it comes to community and love and togetherness, where we alienate we separate, we are divided, and we don't blend with one another. The structures have us separated, but
Exactly.
fused to the power structures, and that's what helps it perpetuate and propagate itself. And yeah, that's a brilliant. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to take us to one line that the 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 start of colonialism was by first of all exterminating the communities in Europe.
Yes.
That was the first target. So to cut the people from their own roots with community, with togetherness, with land, being with land and being connected with land. And once that, and colonialism did not start when all white people came together and agreed, now we are going to decolonize other people. No, it was this elite that is still functioning until today. It changed names and changed structures, but it's the same elite. And so this elite, 500 years ago, cut the farmers from their communities and made them foot soldiers for the plantations and created that settler colonialism. And so when we live in communities, land-based communities, healing togetherness and creating togetherness and weaving our lives together, that's the best antidote to colonialism and to all systems of oppression.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Strongly agree with that. And it's funny. We have been in some similar spaces as we've been passing through our own journeys. I spent some time in Osada in community, learning how to work with the land and build structures and be together and work with difficult emotions. And my partner and I were on that journey. We've been going to eco villages. We were in Slovenia with some people who work for the Global Eco Village Network. And
Well,
we've just been seeing that firsthand, what you're describing, just learning how to grow food, learning how to be resilient, learning how to be in community. And it really changes the way that the self functions, because the self that's in the city is a very different self that's in a community of people who are working together with the land to try to live collectively. And it really makes you notice the kind of scary difference between these two worlds.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think that this glorification of the individualism that white modernity advertised for it, created a kind of isolation that does not fit to the nature of human beings. So,
Yes.
like the scenario of one family child growing up in an apartment in a multi-store building in a city that have at least 8 million people or 10 million people, that child is meant to grow up and rap with other human beings. But the whole system is bumbering that individual to one room, which is yours. Everything is yours, 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 mine, 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 but isolated. The true needs of that human being are not met, but the false needs are often fed, but these false needs will never come to satisfaction because these are not the true needs. But then she grows up with that isolation, and most of these people pass through the majority of their lives trying to compensate for that isolation period, which is during the childhood. Now, the majority of the world is not white. Let us remember that. And the power dynamics of the world is also changing. And so I really have a very tender invitation to white people or people with white identity to dig for their own ancestral roots. I'm teaching about re-indigenizing ourselves as a political act. So to learn to root ourselves wherever we are as like antidote to that isolation that does not serve our psyche, but serve the agenda of the systems of oppression, is just so important. And as you said, these are the places that you can practice this is in community, and living in community can be rough, can be tough, because you are reshaped into these places that the whole society of consumerism is shaping us for, to become individual, opinionated, especially individual. And a healed community is a composition of autonomous individuals. And there's a huge difference between opinionated individual toward autonomous individual. And autonomous is a being that is able to think, feel, digest, make sense within himself, but in relation to others and in relation to space and time. An isolated individual is about, an opinionated individual is about me and me and me and my trauma, me and my story, me and my contact with my parents, me and me and me. Yeah. And community is a good laboratory to create these autonomous individuals that shared a vision, share a way of life that is connected with love, light, and life.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. You're preaching to the choir a little bit on that. But I
I
wonder.
don't like preaching at all, but okay.
I'm curious about your work at Tamara, because Tamara is a very famous community, and is that where you're recording from right now?
Yes, right now.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that community and the things that you've learned there, because that's something that's very important to me. My partner Asha and I, we are facilitators in training for M. Scott Peck's community building method, and we're working in communities, we're practicing, we're flexing that muscle. And as you said, it can be hard, it can be challenging. And for you, you spent a lot of time in this world. And I'm wondering if you have learnings, probably because I know you have insights probably into Bedouin communities, Palestinian communities, the community at Tamara, and I'm sure they all teach different things. And I'm super curious about if you could speak a little bit about each of those and what learnings you've had.
Wow. How many hours we have to record? Yeah, I want first to differentiate between traditional communities and intentional communities. So I grew up in a Bedouin tribe in occupied Palestine, and it is a tribe that only in that location we are sitting for 500 years. So we are blended with the mountain, with the trees. We are the same mud. And it is a tribal, patriarchal, traditional tribe and community. And as a young woman who downloaded feminism without reading about it, I for sure wanted, I became a rebellion against it. So it was a very long journey to discernment. What do I take from that lifestyle of indigenous people being one with land and having this extreme generosity, sacred hospitality, actually, that is running in our blood, just like this, and patriarchal structures that limited my personal growth and freedom. So I had to do also my way out of the tribe, and 20 years after, to come back from a different place as a teacher, as a knowing person, and seeing all the changes that happened in the tribe as well in the last 20 years. Versus intentional community. And here in intentional communities, I want to distinguish between intentional communities in the global north and the intentional communities in the global south. Maybe I start from the global south, because there, to come together in intentional communities is a great thing, because it is coming from this notion of people coming together, not necessarily relatives in blood, but relatives in vision, and creating something that is so advanced in low tech technology and land base and water and so on. And in the global south, it is under the pressure often of poverty, of political situations, of indigenous extermination, and so on and so on. And that's great to learn from. And if I jump to the global north, whenever there are intentional communities of people who come around a vision to create something, it's my opinion, is that for me, it has a very radical and important evolutionary advantage. Why? Because people in the global north have the choice to continue living individual comfort life. So in the global south, you are doing intentional communities or living in traditional communities most of the time because it's a matter of survival. Versus in the global north, you have the choice, and having a choice evolutionary has a great advantage. That's why I really encourage people in the global north to go for that, because if you can make it, it sets an example. And it's also to see that a lot of people in the global south still can be under the illusion of the plastic dream of the West and of the North, and wanting to live in cities and so on. So when we in the North, we show another possibility of choice, of living together and minimizing consumption and increasing togetherness, that's a great example for the people in the global south. Now, Tamira is a combination of intentional community and eco-village and radical political center, which makes it a very unique blend and a very unique place. And it can become a very rough or tough place, because what Tamira took on its agenda is to bring the whole topic of love and sexuality into the center, into the center of the social engineering. And our lines of our article of faith is saying that we are not lacking technologies. We are not lacking wisdom around energy, around many things. But what we are lacking is the trust between people. And the trust between people was broken in mainly three dimensions: the dimension of the flow of resources, finance and money, the flow of decisions, the decision making and power and privilege, and most important, and it's not more important than the other two, the whole topic of love and sexuality is the whole topic where, as I said in the beginning, where love became a romantic sphere and lost its political power, and where the whole topic of eros became manipulated by systems of oppression, mainly religions in this topic, and became a private thing. And in the theory of change of Tamira, we say if we create a place where there is trust among human beings in these three topics, where people co-create their living being in harmony and love with nature and with the divine world, with the earth, with all what lives, that can give a new information for life. And this will make it also replicable in other places. Back to the topic of eros, is not only sexuality, but eros as a vital energy of our beings. Who are we when we are living all of our powers, all of our dimensions, when our creativity and vitality is welcomed? Who we will be when we are free. Yeah, so this what makes Tamira a unique place, and as intentional communities are targeted by the system. They are not wanted because they actually show the holes of the system and showing the alternative. And for sure, systems of oppression do not want places like this. That's why we see how the Zapatista movement in Mexico or the Kurdish movement in Rojava in northern Syria and in many other places, alternatives are attacked, are being at least not supported by the systems, and at most also misunderstood by many people. So in the case of Tamira, we've been often misunderstood by promoting the topic of love and sexuality and being called whatever, sex cult and all kind of things. I see that it's a very important sacred topic to speak about, because we all know that when we are truthful and trustworthy in our personal relationships, and especially in our love and sexual relationships, whether we are partnering with the same gender or different genders, then we are more probably being trusted in other things that we are doing in our lives.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. That's a lot to chew on. But at the end, you sparked something in me when you were talking about love and eros and how this has been something that's been co-opted by power structures to kind of exploit us or oppress us. And that also rings very true, because when I look at myself, it's very hard to summon love for myself. It's much easier to think of all the things I criticize about myself, all of my inadequacies, my insecurities, what I'm not doing well, even body image, like I'm balding, I'm too skinny, I'm not strong enough, whatever it is. All of these messages come in from society to get me to feel less love for myself. And I think if I feel less love for myself, it's harder for me to give love to someone else. And what you're saying sounds like cultivating a culture of actually freely giving love and feeling it and expressing it and using that to feel a sense of personal power that lets you connect with others in a more beautiful and meaningful way, if I understand you correctly.
I think you understood me very exact and very, very correctly. I think in the base of the consuming culture, which is the system of capitalism and all other systems are built on this consuming. There is this deep belief of not yet. You're not yet, not enough, almost not enough. And there is this hamster race toward becoming something else. So most of us, we are spending so much energy to pretend something that we are not yet there. And then between us and ourselves, we know that we are lying. And so you don't trust yourself. And you're pretending. We are putting masks, and we become tired of wearing these masks again and again and again, when we know, when you look at the mirror at yourself, say, I'm not that. But why can't I be loved as I am? And then we have to look to the standardization of beauty and might for men, for beauty for women, and for might and power for men, masculinity and toxic masculinity that is promoted through machoism and things like this. And for women, the standardization often, if not always, is going according to white, blonde, female, skinny body, that the majority of the world does not compel with it. And so many of us spending our times and our energies to become more beautiful, a little bit more attractive, more, and to create a culture that I don't want to paint Tamira as ideal and as that we unlearned all of the thousands of years of patriarchy and indoctrination. No. The opposite. We are still in the lab, but at least we can put these topics on the table and speak about it. We have a method that is called forum, and the forum is a sacred space where we would lead the person to unfold the inner beauty. And that's a very attractive space. You see the being from the inside. We created also a culture of celebration that allows people to consciously step out of following in a blind way the standards that are chiseled in our mind. And this is so tough. It is amazing how it is so internalized. And then you suddenly see that This being that you would look at him, at her, through the eyes of indoctrinated individual is suddenly so beautiful if you step out of this lens. And so it is a matter of training. It's a matter of really seeing how the systems were affecting us and consciously taking these layers again and again. And it's a continuous work. It's not that you did it once and that's it, you are exempt. No. It's like a continuous work, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah, all of that is really fascinating to me. We even had some experience with Forum while we were at Osada, and it was pretty powerful and enlightening, revealing. It was a very different way of engaging and being with others. And it also made me realize that in modernity and the kind of default spaces that many of us exist in, we don't really have room for that kind of play or that kind of expression or that kind of safety and comfort. And that's a tragic thing to me. And I think that feeling, that pervasive feeling of being disconnected, being unsafe, feeling like you're not enough, all of the things we're talking about, to go back and make a full circle, I think all of those things allow things like genocide and othering and dehumanization to occur, because that's like the fertile soil for those things to grow in, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You see, again, to come back to the culture of consumerism, individualism, you have to numb many aspects of yourself. You have to. I mean, after all, when we are in cities or in intensive places where the system of capitalism and white coloniality is working on us, we are all the time under a huge pressure of senses. We are overwhelmed. We are overstimulated, stimulated till the level that we have to shut innerly so to protect ourselves. And that's exactly where is the places where we start shutting one place has to lead to shutting other places. And so the numbness has to go deeper till the level that we normalize it. Because everything is overwhelming. We become numb. We become not able to respond. And then when you notice yourself that you are numb, but you actually don't, you're lonely. And the other person walking right next to you with earphones and sunglasses and whatever, and the mask in the road, you can't communicate with, and you cannot communicate your loneliness. So two numb, lonely individuals running in that hamster race trail. And so the numbness leads us to places of despair, of places of addictions, of places that we have to consume more to buy our portion of happiness. But we know that all this consumerism is not answering. And so we are in a magic place. It's like a poison place that we cannot get out of it. So when you don't have a pathway out, it's better that you keep numbing yourself. And this is the places where activists, podcasts, writers, media, communities, alternatives have to speak up and to suggest ways out. It's not the way. We are also learning. We are also unlearning things. But at least it's a pathway out of that labyrinth that is leading us all to death. So people in the West now seeing a genocide happening now in front of our eyes. And people move their shoulders and say, I don't know what to do with it. Well, that's it. That I don't know what to do have been trained and indoctrinated to us to come to this place of now saying, I don't know what to do. We know. If we take a moment of silence and a moment of stillness, we know that every life needs to be protected. But if you're not aware that you are already indoctrinated into racism, then you would see a Palestinian being killed and see that he is different than you. You would think that in the time of that Islamophobia is on the agenda of the far right, and you yourself go and elect the far right because you are afraid of refugees, then for sure you will not act when a genocide is happening. So all of this complicity that we are in, and again, it might feel harsh, and it is, but it's also an invitation to step out of it. And forgiveness is there for us because we didn't know until now. But now that you know, act, act, act for life.
And as far as ways that people can act, there's obviously, like you said, media, podcasts, news stories, raising awareness, activism, donating to organizations like UNRWA. What other things can people do? Because I would bet a lot of listeners resonate with what you're saying, and they say, yeah, she's right. This complicity, this helplessness, it all feels like it's a consequence of the system that we're in. How do we reform this? How do we reject these things and tell ourselves a new story and take actions that actually empower one another and restore love and connection? And what are some practical things that people can do? Do any come to mind?
I mean, sure. When I speak again and again and they say that in the base of all this warfare is capital, is interest. So let us unite and give an alternative to that. As long as we consume the system, what it produces for us, we are complicit. So let's create the alternatives that goes towards simplicity, toward not being hooked with the system. Now, if you are listening and you are a citizen of a European government that is actively arming these systems on daily basis, go to the streets, write to your deputies, demonstrate, don't vote to these governments that are... There's a lot of... That's the power of people in Western countries, have more power than people who are under the rebels now. So you have a huge historical responsibility, and you will be accountable to it. The future generations will hold us all accountable. How did you show up? So boycotting, when now it is very clear that Israel, if it continue with this way of escalating the whole region, it will collapse economically. Let us also take this power of boycotting products, as it was done for South Africa, that brought to change. I cannot say that South Africa today is in a good state, but at least without that apartheid. We have lots of tools to do, but in the same time, I want you to love Jewish people.
Yes.
I want you to love, if your actions are not connected, coming from this place of love, in the base and the foundation of nonviolence is that I give a mirror like this to you for your actions. And at the same time, I hold your back with my love with the other hand. So when I give you the mirror and say no to your actions, I don't drop you away. I don't let you fall. So we need to hold each other with love. And I do see that the majority of people especially in Germany, but not only in European countries, did not come to this place that they love Jewish people. They would actually prefer that they stay there, don't come back to Europe. So I want you to confront yourself with these feelings. Why? So anti-Semitism is still living in you. Islamophobia is living in you. That's why you are allowing this. You know what? This world that we created with these imaginary borders is falling apart. Falling apart. So let us be the ones who create the light and the alternative, so this world can be inhabited with love for everybody. And it is possible. And Gandhi, the leader, the so thinker for the Indian nation, said, Mother Earth has on her belly for all our needs and not greed. I believe in this absolutely. And I say, but unless we also create structures where we articulate the greed, we cannot give the needs. And that comes the piecework of social engineering. How do we create social places where we hold accountable those of us who went wrong. They are not wrong. Their actions are wrong. And how do we call them back to love?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a heavy task to figure out how to do that. But I think you're right. I think that is the task. That is what needs to be done. So yeah, that's a lot to think about and chew on. And I would love to talk to you for another hour, but I know that your time is limited and we're probably nearing an end now. And I just wanted to give you the floor for the end and let you talk about where people could find you, where they might be able to donate, where they can learn more about what you do and your activism or Tamara or any of the stuff that you've said, just so that we can direct people to find you.
Thank you. So I am mainly located in Tamera in Portugal, and my projects are in Palestine, in Farha, the first eco-village of Palestine, and other places in the world. Like next month, I'm going to Rojava, to northern Syria, inshallah. If we collect all the funds. So if there's somebody here that hears this and is able to give the last kick of 9,000 euros we are making a very big delegation, high-ranking delegation of politicians and water activists who are going there, and myself is among them. People can donate to Tamera under the title Palestinian Fund, and this fund is going now for the last 10 years of helping Palestinians, especially from the West Bank, to come to Tamera for learnings, for education, or helping activists and experts from the world to go to Palestine and create spaces of exchange. Right now, the Palestinian Fund is mainly used to send humanitarian aid to Gaza, food and medications. So you are more than welcome, and please add that it's for the Palestinian Fund. Yeah, I, despite the despair and the huge pain that is on my heart, I'm also having hope. I'm having the deepest feeling that we are in the darkest moment before sunrise, and these are the moments of where the doubts are there and the pain is there and everything is there, and I want to believe that the light will come. Whether it will be in my own lifetime or not, that's not mine to decide, but I will do all what I can so it comes. And when it comes, I will hold my heart that I don't fall into despair. We can be in pain, but we can not be broken. So even now, I'm not broken. I'm in huge pain, and I want to sit with this pain and not to color it too fast with something. But I'm not broken. I'm not broken. I count on love. I count on so many helping forces that are around us, ready, absolutely ready to come to our aid once we have the right decisions for life. So let's do it.
Thank you, A'ida. Thank you for passing through today and sharing all of your time and wisdom and words. This was a beautiful conversation for me, and I'm very grateful for your time. And yes, this was a privilege. Thank you for all the work that you do. You are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. May we have a good week and Jum'ah Mubarak and Shabbat Shalom.